So now we will be diving into the manual, the teacher manual, the lessons that you will be using to teach our students. So I will show you what's the structure of the manual. Let me share. So here's the manual. The manual begins with an explanation of the acknowledgements, who we are grateful to collaborate with, and then you have a table of contents. You will see that we have links that are live in the electronic version of the manual. So if I click on the links to lesson resources, I will reach a list of resources, of materials. So this is, for instance, the strategy resource. And if I select this, I will open and it will give me the actual poster that I can print out and I can include as a poster in the classroom. Also, I will have my strategy for spelling, the vowels poster, the consonants poster, the blends poster, and the digraphs one that we will be using when we work on the review lessons. Then we have the syllable types posters, and I will open that so you can see what it looks like. So I have open, no, closed, not. The gate is closed, the vowel cannot say its name. R control, nor. VCE, note, with a dot on top of the E. Vowel team, noun, OU, and then consonantally, noble. Remember, non-accented syllable. Noble, not noble. Not noble, castle, cattle, non-accented. You also have a common prefixes list, common suffixes, common roots. And then you see here we have the list of the comprehension questions that they match the books that we have used in the past when we work with our students. These were lists questions that we used with chapter books, but we encourage you to use books from your own program that you may have, chapter books that are appropriate for your grade level. All the texts that we are utilizing, they're grade level texts. And the texts that we had selected were actually texts that they were from science and social studies. Finally, we have printable games that we have created that they could be sent home for the students to continue practice, for the students to work in class in a rainy day, or it can be a day that you devote to do the progress monitor, and then you spend the rest of the time in playing one of the educational games. So we have provided these links for you to directly access the folders where this content is, and you can access it directly there. Now, in addition to these resources, we have a key to our manual. So we have included within the lesson these symbols that they mean something, and that way by knowing the key you can understand what we symbolize, what it symbolizes within the lesson. So when you see this icon, it means that there is a link to a video that may be explaining the entire lesson, may be explaining a segment of the lesson, and we indicate in the explanation what you will be seeing. If you see the symbol of an ear, it's a link to a resource where you can hear the word and the pronunciation of a word. If you see this pin, it means that's a note about necessary materials that you need to have. If you see this symbol, it means that the teacher is the one who displays and models. If you have this symbol, it means that you're working with their workbook. If you see this, it means that there is a link to a sample of student workbook pages. Check your work, directing students to put their finger on their workbook page and check their work with your guidance, because you may say in the lesson, put your finger on the first word, but that's part of checking. Chapter book is when you're reading. Chapter book questions is when you will be asking questions related to the text, and you have a link to the comprehension questions that they relate to this specific chapter book that you will be using. Within each one of the lessons now, once you reach, let's say, the first lesson, and the rest of the lessons have exactly the same structure. Within each one of the lessons, you will have the lesson materials. What will you need in order to teach the lesson? Also, you have a lesson agenda. What is it that you will be working on and accomplishing in that meeting with the students? You may decide to have this agenda written already on your board. So when you meet with your small group or when you meet with your group overall, to say, this is what we will be completing during our meeting. That is a very good way to monitor the task, monitor the progress, but also for the students to know what is happening within a lesson. It supports communication between you and your students with your team, because together you are a team. On the left, you see we have helpful resources. This is where you will click and then you can select an explanation about how to teach the review lesson. This will lead you to an explanation that we have provided on how do you teach the review lesson. And then also you see we have a link to how do you teach my strategy. This is the link of how do I teach the my strategy lesson. And my strategy overall. What is the overall way of supporting students on the use of the strategy? And then finally, we have added a video where you can see the entire lesson. Within the lessons, I will move a bit forward. We have a link with a little clip that is explaining each one of the sections. So when we have available a video, you will see that we have an explanation of how you say the timing of it, because we provide the time, but we want to show you in real life how exactly this sounds. However, our collaborating educators, our interventionists, our teachers, our partners, our collaborators in this work said that they would like to have also the whole video to see how the whole video looks like, what it looks like. So we have provided the entire video too. These are meant for you to review before you'll go teach the lesson. I will say this again. These resources are meant for you to review before you will teach your lesson. As a reminder, because you completed the professional development, but then you will go to teach a lesson on roots, for instance, and Greek and Latin roots, and you may not remember. So it is good as you prepare for your lesson, as you plan for your lesson, to be able to read, of course, the components of the lesson, to read the words that you will be working with, but to have a very quick and easy a way of remembering how exactly do I teach this? What is the language I will use? What is the pacing that I will use? So that is what these little clips serve to function as a reminder for you before you go teach the lesson with your students. And then each one of the lessons has exactly the same structure. Each lesson has that structure. We begin with an introduction, the lesson objective. In the initial lessons, we have a quick review of what's a blend, what's a digraph, what's a vowel, what's a blend. But then later in the lessons, and I'm sorry to get you dizzy by moving quickly, we have the lesson objective, a quick review if needed, explanation, reading words with a teacher modeling, reading words the teacher continues modeling, reading words collaborative practice, independent activity for the students. So we have a gradual release of responsibility. The teacher will do, we will do, you will do on your own. The collaborative practice may be that the students do it with the teacher, as the teacher primarily is doing the work and the teacher is the one who is leading the process. We try not to have gaps and guessing. There is no guessing. So if the teacher, as the teacher is working, the teacher is the one who will be asking the questions, and if there is a slight delay, the teacher will provide the answer. We don't want to frustrate the students. The students who are in this group, they need this instruction. If they knew this knowledge and they had this knowledge, they wouldn't be in this group. So they are in this group because they don't have that knowledge. So the goal is not to ask them and get them to guess. We want them to be supported in providing the answer. That's why the teacher is the one who primarily does the work and primarily leads the group in this, even in the collaborative practice. Then there is the independent practice. And after that, the teacher models spelling. So we transition from reading to spelling. The teacher will model spelling. The students will spell. They will correct with the support of the teacher as the teacher reviews. And then after that, there is writing sentences from dictation. Finally, they're reading a book. So the format I showed you is the same format that is applied across all the lessons. It is exactly the same structure in all the lessons. Now, what I would like to point out to you, as I was scrolling through, I'm sure that you noticed these red signs that say stop. Stop. What is this stop? You notice that we have a first set of words, and then we have a second set of words. What is this second set of 5? This is only to be used, only teach the second set if it's indicated in the progress monitor. So at the very end of the instruction that you're providing, they're progress monitoring lessons. In this, if the students perform less than 75%, less than 80% in reading, and it makes sense the sections that they missed this information, you can go back and you can reteach the second set of 5. And that is when you will teach the second set of 5. Otherwise, you continue from 1 week to the next week to the following week by only teaching the first set of words, not teaching the second set of words. I want to make that very clear to avoid you teaching both the first and the second. They are not meant to be taught. And we have first set of words and second set of words for teacher modeling, for student practice, and also when we're working on spelling, again, first set of 5, second set of 5. Why is it there? Only to be used if the students fail, if the students don't perform as expected in the progress monitor. And when we work on dictation, you see that we have 2 sentences. Well, again, the second sentence is to be used only if you're teaching the second set of everything, because the students have not performed as expected when they were working on in the progress monitor. So this is the structure that you will see across all the lessons in this manual, in this work. At the very end of every lesson, you will see we have included teacher reflection. It is very important for us as professionals, as educators, to reflect on our instruction. So we need to ask, what went well? What worked well in my instruction? What is it that really worked well for me as an instructor delivering and for my students? And then what would make this lesson better? What could I do to make this better? Maybe I didn't finish on time. Why? Perhaps I was giving additional explanations, or I started having side talk on topics that were interesting to the students, but they were not relevant to the task. So what would make this lesson better, more focused, in order for me to complete the instruction within the instructional period I have devoted for this lesson, this type of work, this intervention, or this type of morphology lessons? Did the students learn the concepts? Do they need additional practice? So I should be asking these questions as an educator, as a professional, to reflect on me and on my instruction, but also on the components of the lesson and how I transition from one component to the next component. Finally, I would like to discuss with you something that our teachers and our educators, interventionists, collaborators that we worked with, shared with us. They said that this is not a program that you just open it up and you just teach it. You need to prepare for it. So you need to spend time planning for this. I will give you an example. When you will be working, and I will go in the initial table of contents so that I will select one of the lessons when we will have more complex lessons. I'll give you an example, going to the multisyllabic. Prefixes and suffixes, where everything is working together. This is after students have completed what are the syllable types, how do I read words that have 2 and 3 syllable types, base words? How do I read words with prefixes? How do I read words with suffixes? How do I read words that have prefixes, suffixes, and multiple syllables into the base word? So if I go to teach this lesson, of course, you can read the introduction, you can read the explanation. Once the teacher will go to model, this is the word that the teacher needs to write on the board. So the teacher needs to write. So we will now practice reading words. Watch me. I need to read this word. I will use my strategy. I see the prefix miss. I will box it. I see the suffix ion, Sean. I will box it. I have the base representa. I read the word. I read it. But if I read representa or representa, why am I modeling for the students the process? So this is, I have the base. This is the base. I will underline each vowel. I will not break the blend. So I will have re, pre, open, sent. The word is represent. And with the affix is representation. Oh, you can hear the sound as z. I told my mom I was done with homework, but that was a misrepresentation. I was not fluent when I was presenting this, was I? I was not clear in my explanation. I was confused as I was describing this because I was not certain of what I was presenting to the students. And this uncertainty, if you feel it, the students will feel it. The students will know. So it is important that you plan ahead, that you are in the position of knowing what are the words that I will be using, to at least read the words and the explanations that we provide, so you are not discovering yourself like you don't know and you're questioning it. Because in this case, I may have said too, why does it have an A? Represent. Why isn't it? I don't say representation, I say representation. So I would be questioning the instruction. The moment I will be questioning what I'm saying or how I'm doing it, it's a question that the students will raise too, and maybe that will disengage them. I want to make clear that this is very different from us saying to you, be flexible. It's important to be flexible. In this case, I could have said representation. No, it is representation. I broke the blend. This is flexible because I am really showing flexible division, the boundaries of the syllables, and flexible pronunciation of the vowel. But when I'm discovering and I'm reading the lesson to make sure that I'm reading it correctly, I'm just reading the script. I'm not teaching the students. And it is really important that when you're teaching the students, you're committing and transmitting the knowledge in a way that the students will understand it. And we have provided all the information of how exactly to say the words, explain the words, explain the roots, meanings, because our partners asked us to provide this information to make it very clear. So when they are prepping to present this information with the students, they can do this in a way that they also feel confident to share this information. So in the lessons, as we are working with, you will always see the same structure with the teacher model, with the students practice immediately after, and at the very end, you will see again a way for you to reflect. Something I would like to also show you, as I said earlier, is within each one of the lessons, we have provided little clips. So you will have the video at the very beginning that will be explaining what this task is, how do you do it, how do I teach the words. Then you will have the how do I teach my strategy. Then you will have the student workbook for this week and how it connects. Then you will be able to watch an example of the lesson. So for each one of these parts, you have clips that you can use to remind yourself as you are pre-planning. So it is important that you spend time to pre-plan your lessons when you're teaching, to make sure, not because, to make sure that you're delivering the information with clarity to your students. I want to make that very clear. It is not just because it is important to teach with fidelity. It is important to teach the students. It is important that you don't spend time trying to understand yourself what the instructions are, because that will chew up instructional time. And unfortunately, in small groups, we usually have very small time. But even in tier one, in larger group, we have limited time. So we are trying to be very cognizant of the time that we have. And then the second part is we want to make sure that we deliver the instruction in such a manner that the students are confident that the strategies we're teaching them are effective, that what we tell them to use in order to be successful is really effective. So with that in mind, make sure that you will spend time to review the manual and then also to pre-plan your lessons before you'll go to teach them with your students.